All right, let's talk about this right to disconnect legislation. Is that something you'll go to the election promising to overturn?
Yes, we will.
Do you intend to go to the election with an IR policy reversing many of these Labor changes? I'm talking about the policy around casuals, around multi-employer bargaining, etc.
Well, again, Michaelia Cash is doing a great job calling out some of the outrageous things that Labor's doing at the moment, completely and utterly at the behest of the union movement and now the Greens as well. And if you think it's okay to outsource your industrial relations or your economic policy to the Greens, which is what the Prime Minister's doing, then we are going to see a continuation of the productivity problem in our country. And as the Reserve Bank Governor pointed out, if you don't address it, you'll see interest rates continue to climb or you'll see them stay higher for longer. And that's why the tens of millions of dollars that come from the union movement into Labor are all about Labor repaying the union movement. It's not about workers. The modern Labor Party is not about the worker. They're about the union boss, and they're about the industry super funds who tip millions of dollars into the Labor Party as well. So we will take a policy that's in our country's best interests, that provides support to workers, but that doesn't make it impossible, particularly for small businesses, to employ staff, because particularly when the economy turns down, we want employers to err on the side of keeping those workers on. And if Labor continues with the number of business closures that we've seen at record levels over the last 12 months, then there won't be those jobs available and the unemployment rate will go up, which is exactly what the government predicts in their budget.
What do you make of just turning to foreign affairs now, what do you make of the performance of Joe Biden late last week? Do you think it's time he stepped aside for another Democratic candidate in this year's election?
Andrew, I had the honour of meeting President Biden in New York in 2018 when we were negotiating the AUKUS deal, and I found him a remarkable person to deal with, along with his senior advisors in the defence and intelligence space. The candidacy is an issue for the Democratic Party, as it is for Mr. Trump President Trump in the Republican Party. Australia will work with whoever's elected as the US President, and the alliance is more important than ever, given we know we live in a precarious time here in Southeast Asia.
Could you work with Kevin Rudd as ambassador, or would you seek to replace him if you're elected?
I mean, what grounds would there be to replace him? I would work very closely with him. I've known Kevin. I caught up with him when he was last in Australia, and he came to give us an update in relation to what he was seeing in Washington. So he's represented his country well, and we're a few steps down the road there. But I think there's, for most Australians, they get it, that the importance of the relationship with America is, at its height, more so than any period since the Second World War. And that's a fairly significant statement, but that's exactly as the Prime Minister puts it as well.
Okay, while we're speaking of ex-Prime Ministers, Malcolm Turnbull called you a thug on this ABC series. Was that a good old-fashioned square-up he wants to see in Labor ads?
Look, I spent a lot of time with Malcolm Turnbull. Matthias and I and Christopher Pyne, a few others, helped that government survive, probably longer than it should have in hindsight. So we helped with a lot of political decisions that, despite good intent, Malcolm just didn't have the capacity to make. I heard him describe a lot of people, and to be honest, thug is probably one of the nicest things I heard him say about most people that he described, including many of his friends. So I think most people have moved on from that era so much it's not funny. And I think when you look at Julia Gillard or you look at John Howard, these people have moved on with grace. And I think Julia Gillard's, even though she wasn't a great Prime Minister, if by any objective analysis, she was a decent person. She honoured her party. She gave credit to her successors. She did everything she could to keep Labor in power or to win the next election. And she's conducted herself with great grace and dignity since then, and her reputation's only been enhanced. So there are different models that people can adopt. I think that's frankly, the more dignified one, but people conduct themselves according to their own personalities and, what happened in their childhood and the rest of it. That's all, I suppose plays into it. But there are different models people can pursue, and each their own.
Mr Dutton, just briefly and finally, what do you think of the suggestion Anthony Albanese might seek to appoint an Indigenous Governor-General this year?
Well, Andrew, I think the Governor-General appointment is one that's made on merit. There are many people within the Indigenous community who would be with merit and would be in consideration. There are some great Australians otherwise, including some former politicians, even on the Labor side, who you could quite easily contemplate for that high office. Liberal and Labor have made appointments based on what's in our country's best interests. You don't want an advocate in there. You want somebody who doesn't have a track record of having, been a partisan player in politics or having made disparaging remarks about one side of politics or the other in recent debates, particularly the Voice debate, which did divide the nation unnecessarily, and the Prime Minister, I think, lives with that regret every day. So there are different people who could be contemplated, and we're happy to work with the government and have conversations about who is a candidate that might, be supported on a bipartisan basis.
Opposition Leader Peter Dutton, thanks so much for your time this Sunday morning.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you.